Good evening. From Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University in the Gail Lemrod Auditorium, welcome to the President Speaker Series. On behalf of President John Johnson, I'm Marc Bernier, the moderator for tonight's event. Before we introduce our special guest, Fox News political analyst and former Congressman John Leboutillier, I call upon the creator of this series to talk a little bit about the next direction of the President Speaker Series. I ask for some comments from President John P. Johnson.
Thank you. Thank you very much. How many of you remember William F. Buckley? When I first met Mark, I knew one of the things that I wanted to do at the university was to try and provide a speaker series that would bring distinguished individuals to Daytona Beach and to the university, where we could invite the citizens of our great community and students from the university, and we could allow them an opportunity to increase their awareness of geopolitical concerns. And I thought, and I was thinking about William F. Buckley and firing line and how much fun that I had watching that when I was a student at Florida State, and before that time, actually. I won't date myself exactly. But I asked Mark if he could do a program. I knew he could, and would he be willing to do that and take a position with Embry-Riddle. And he was kind enough to consent to do that. I think he's done a wonderful job. And so we're going to expand that in the coming years. I would like to see us bring in nationally and internationally known figures who may be at times controversial, but in being controversial, air issues and look at both sides of issues so that we can grow intellectually, so that we can challenge our own assumptions and self-beliefs, and so that we can have an opportunity to see where other people stand and develop a broader perspective of the world around us. And that's really what I want to do. So we've with that in mind, we've lined up, I think, a few pretty good speakers, guest speakers, for the coming year. One will be Dr. Charles Krauthammer, Pulitzer Prize-winning author and columnist, and we're very pleased to have him on January 20th. We'll put these in the paper as well as a reminder, and we hope everyone will come. And then February 11th, we'll have former Michigan Governor Jennifer Granholm, interesting individual, and I think you're going to enjoy listening to her. And then on March 2nd, Dr. Ben Carson, who is a neurosurgeon and will speak on the changing direction of healthcare in America. And he's never been shy. If you know Dr. Carson, he expresses himself without hesitation or reservation. And then finally, on somewhere later in the year, September 15th, we'll have George Will come in, a conservative political columnist, and I think you're going to enjoy that. So thank you very much for coming. We look forward to having a good year, and Mark, thank you, sir. Appreciate all you do.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Appreciate it. Thank you, sir. Kyle will be coming through the audience, and he will be taking your questions following about a 40 to 45-minute exchange that John and I will have, and there's an awful lot to cover in a limited amount of time. So without further ado, let us introduce our special guest for the President Speaker Series tonight, former New York Congressman, Fox News political analyst and host of Political Insiders, the Honorable John Leboutillier.
Thank you, Mark.
Good to have you back in town.
I love coming here. I should tell everybody here, I am a radio listener. That's my thing. I love talk radio, and I'm guest on a lot of shows, and Marc Bernier is the best host. I don't like the national hosts. I don't like them. They don't have guests. They just talk about themselves. Mark does great interviews, and you learn from a good interview and a good interviewer. And so I love being on the show. It's my third time here. I feel like I should have a house down here in Daytona Beach.
We're happy to have you back. You know, it's interesting. Interviewers can learn from other interviewers. Many people in this audience may know, but many more may not know, that John had the first interview with Richard Nixon following his leaving office. You had a comprehensive, long-form interview with Nixon. Tell that story about how that happened.
I've had three actually, great interviews that were unique. Number one was that one which was 1984, right before the Winter Olympics. I asked President Nixon, would he give me the first interview, as you said, since he resigned. He'd resigned in 74, so this is 10 years. He'd never done a live radio interview, and he said yes, and ABC Network said we're going to build a whole Friday afternoon around it, and it would be 1 hour, no commercials, Nixon talking to me, and then an hour pregame and an hour postgame where these idiots analyze the thing. And Nixon was the most fascinating human being I've ever been around. I went and had several meetings with him when I ran for office and when I was in office and after. And he was great to me, and he's the smartest man I've ever been in a room with. If you have a problem and you told Nixon your problem, he'd figure it out right away. He had a problem with his own problems, apparently, but he could solve problems, and he was fantastic. And we had a great interview. It was great, and it's in the Radio Hall of Fame or whatever. It's on tape in there. That was my best one. The other two, because it ties in, 1981, I'm a congressman, and I'm asked on the Tom Snyder Show. Any of you remember Tom Snyder?
Yeah.
And he had a show called The Tomorrow Show, and he'd done it in L.A. I'd been on it when I wrote Harvard Hates America, my book, which I'll get to because it ties in with William Buckley. And I then get into Congress. Tom Snyder had moved to New York, and the show was doing badly. So they hired a genius producer to come in and fix The Tomorrow Show. The genius producer, Roger Ailes.
Wow.
And I kind of knew Roger politically. We knew each other a little bit. And I'm on there one night, and he comes up to me and says, John, we're going to start a new segment. We're going to have celebrities interviewing celebrities. Would you be willing to do it? Right away, I thought, oh, man, this is great. I can ask out every beautiful actress I've ever wanted to meet. He said, okay, submit 10 names, and we'll give you approval, and then you try. So bottom line is I got one acceptance, and it was Alexander Solzhenitsyn. And it was fantastic. And so I go up to Cavendish, Vermont in October 1981, and the NBC, which was the Tomorrow Show, sent 2 airplanes of all this video, audio equipment, a big deal. And I spent the weekend with Alexander Solzhenitsyn and his wife, who spoke English. He didn't. He was a very tall man. He had 3 or 4 fingers had been blown off. And he showed me where he wrote. And he wrote all day, 8 hours every day, standing up. And I played chess with his son and soccer with this kid who's gone on to be a big concert pianist, Ignat Solzhenitsyn. It was fantastic. And then the third one is one that fits you. Thanksgiving, 81, WMCA Radio asked me they knew that I loved being a talk radio host, and I'd never done it. So they said, look, we need a substitute. Would you come on and substitute on Thanksgiving afternoon? But you've got to get your own guests and the whole bit.
Who are you filling in for?
Barry Gray.
Oh, wow.
Barry Gray, who was my favorite radio host. And I'm a congressman, so I go in there, and I placed a few calls before the show to try to get people to come on. And I thought, what the hell? So I call the Western White House, President Reagan, and I get some guy out there, and I said, blah, 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 I'm doing the show, and I want the president. The guy says, it's Thanksgiving. He's not going to come on. I said, well, I'll ask him, please. We'd love to have him on for a few minutes in New York. And the guy said, well, I'll pass it on. So that's that. I go into the station. 81, already the left is getting on Reagan for budget cuts, and he's giving ketchup in school lunches and calling it vegetables and all this stuff. And some guy calls up from New Jersey, and he says, I hate Reagan. Reagan is ruining this country. Reagan is the worst president this country's ever had. The man's been in office for 7 months, and they're trashing him, right? He's awful. And I see through the glass, the producer's going, and I don't know. So I put the earphone. He said, we've got the president on the telephone. I go, you're kidding. He says, no. So I say to the guy from New Jersey, excuse me, you got to hold on for a second. The President Reagan is coming on to respond to you. And sure enough, Reagan comes on, and he was so nice. And he talked for about 7 minutes about what he was doing as president and this and that. And I thought that was one of the greatest things ever. And funny, this poor guy in New Jersey must have thought, God, Reagan heard me attacking him. So anyway, you're looking at this, I know. I'm going to explain this.
I was going to get that.
I'm going to get to it because the president asked me something. We'll get to that. If I can do one thing, on William Buckley, who I only met a couple times. But I was at Harvard, undergrad, hating the liberals at Harvard, hating them because of their hypocrisy. And a friend of mine said, you ought to write a book. So I write this book, and I can't get it published and all this and that. And I finally send it to an old man publisher in Indiana. He calls me up. He says, John, I'm going to publish your book. I said, great. Yeah, he said, I had some success. I published William Buckley's first book, God and Man at Yale. And I think your book is the natural successor to that. And my book was titled Harvard Hates America, which is very controversial. And I'm not in any way in the vein of William F. Buckley, but in the sense of being a young person who went to college who was offended by what they saw in education, which I was. And here we are 40 years later, and this rot that I saw at Harvard of liberalism being indoctrinated into students, and I wouldn't be for conservatism being indoctrinated in either. This is now all over education in America. It's in the high schools, it's in the elementary schools, it's everywhere. And it's wrong. And we ought to be teaching the kids right and wrong, reading and math and science and all the basic things. But as for their politics, it's up to them, not lefties. Excuse me.
I have to add two postscripts to this. 3 years after John did that interview at WMCA, I had my own experience there, and I was a producer for Barry Gray.
Yeah. Well, did we meet?
We did not. We both worked for the Strausses at different times, and on 9/11, we had a scheduled interview that did not want to cancel. His name was William F. Buckley, and he appeared on WNDB.
How about that?
I mean, our history over 15 years has crossed paths with a lot of the same people. I have to ask you, explain the string.
Okay, so I have on my wrist here Buddhist strings that were put on me in April of this year. As Mark knows, and some of you, I don't talk about it much on the show, but a little bit, I am a passionate believer, and I know for a fact that we left hundreds of American POWs behind in Vietnam and Laos at the end of the war. And they are still there, and I am still trying to solve the problem. And I went in April for a month, and I went all over Laos. And during this, these generals over there had this ceremony for me, and they put these Buddhist strings on, which are to be good luck. And I hope they are good luck. I haven't had the good luck for this issue yet, but I still believe we will see in the next months or a year living American POWs come out of either Laos, Vietnam, or Russia, because they're there. I'm working like crazy. I'm doing everything I can to get them out. God must want them to come out. This has to happen. This is the biggest sin of our lifetime. It's the biggest scandal of our lifetime.
What's the motivation to keep them there?
All right. I don't want to be boring, but the war ended at the same time Watergate was beginning. And to get out of the war, we had the Paris Peace Agreement, and Nixon signed the Paris, he didn't sign it, Kissinger and William Rogers signed the Paris Peace Agreement, but Nixon gave the Vietnamese a private agreement, a letter on February 1st, 73, saying, we will pay you $4.75 billion. In return, you're going to gather up all the POWs in Southeast Asia and give them back to us. Okay, that's a fact. The prisoners started coming home. McCain, Jim Stockdale, all the famous prisoners started coming home. 593 came home. Let's call it 600. The Vietnamese kept another 600 back as insurance to get the money that Nixon promised. Nixon's going down the drain in Watergate. The Congress is Democrat. When they hear these stories about the prisoners were tortured and, oh my God, their arms were yanked out of the sockets, all the Congress people said, I'm not paying this money to Vietnam. The Secretary of State ran up to Capitol Hill, said, please don't say that. You have to stay quiet. We have to pay the money to Vietnam or the deal won't go through. Well, here we are 40 years later. We've never paid one penny to Vietnam. And those 600 prisoners were never let go. We've gone through 4 decades. Every government is in on it now and lying because they can't afford to say, yes, we lied about it back then. So we're stuck in the mud of each government protecting their own lies. And the men are rotting away. And it's a sin. I know all the families of these people. I cannot even tell you what they've been through. And they are military families. They're the best families. They believe in the country. They believe in the military. They've been lied to. And it's the most disgraceful thing ever. So I'm dedicated to getting the thing solved one way or the other, and hopefully it'll happen. Yeah. And if it happens, I'll come back here and we'll do another show just about that.
You're not a big fan of John McCain. Tell him why.
Not. I got into politics 1973-4. I read about a guy who was a POW in Vietnam, Leo Thorsness. He had been hung on a wall upside down for 10 days in a cell, so he's going to the bathroom all over himself. And in the cell was a speaker, a PA speaker, and they were playing George McGovern's campaign speeches and Jane Fonda and all that left-wing nonsense to break the will of these POWs. And this guy said, if I ever get out of here, I'm going to go home to South Dakota and I'm going to run against George McGovern for the U.S. Senate. I'm a freshman at Harvard. I read about this. I go, that's for me. And to make a long story short, I moved to South Dakota and go to work for this guy. I was his national finance chairman. I learned how to raise money, anything to help him. And in the process of that, one night the phone rings, and it's a guy from Pensacola, Florida calling, John McCain. Had been a prisoner with Leo. They were friends. I talked to McCain that night. It was Friday night, June 7th, 1974. I go on, have my own life, get elected to Congress, get into the POW thing. And near the end of my short time in Congress, who comes around but John McCain, who's now the Navy liaison up on the Hill. And he becomes a congressman. And he is horrible about this issue. You would think, as a former prisoner, he would care about the truth about the prisoners that didn't come home. But for some reason, he's on the exact opposite side. He is awful about it. He's nasty. Nobody who knows John McCain in politics likes him. None of them. None of the Republican senators. None of them endorsed him against George W. Bush. Normally, senators endorse their fellow senator. Not with him. He's a rotten personality. I'm not doubting that he's was a good POW or anything like that, but he's a nasty guy. Sorry.
Guess you won't be at the McCain Christmas party this year.
No, hope not.
Let's get to the meat.
He won't be at the Leboutillier Christmas party either, I can tell you that.
To get to the meat of the thing, Election Day is Tuesday, early voting underway, and we've had some weird things happen so far. Let's ask the big question everybody in the room was wondering. Will Republicans take over the Senate Tuesday?
They have to. I think they will. If they don't win the Senate this time, we don't win the Senate this time, we're never going to win it. I think we are going to win 52 seats probably, something like that. My criticism is not whether we're going to win it. I think we will win. It's what are we going to do with it when we win it? And we can talk about that too. But we could go through every seat for a minute, and I can give you what I think is going to happen. And on governorships too, with the exception here, I do not have a clue about what could happen in Florida. I think, who does have a clue? It's an amazing race. As Pat Caddell said on Sunday night, he said, if you had in Florida what they have in Nevada on the ballot, a line that says none of the above, it would win in Florida.
Yeah, well, a lot of people think independents are going to draw more votes, and it could come from either one.
Right.
It's going to be close. Most people believe we won't know until the late evening or early morning hours who wins the governor's race here. Mitch McConnell.
Yeah. Let me just say one last thing about the governorship here.
Yes.
Whatever criticism anybody has of Rick Scott, I think he's a decent human being. I really do. And I met him once in the green room at Fox. Couldn't have been nicer. I don't get a bad feeling in my stomach about him. Charlie Crist, I wouldn't trust him as far as I could kick him. And I just don't trust the guy. On your show, as it was happening, he was running as a Republican for the Senate. He says, don't worry, I'm not leaving the party. Then he leaves the party. He becomes an independent. Don't worry, I'm not going to be a Democrat. I mean, everything he said he won't do, he has done. So if there's a reward for being a good person, Rick Scott should eke it out.
Chris Christie, governor of New Jersey, was here yesterday. He was in Ormond Beach campaigning for the governor's reelection. And then I understood he was going to get on a plane and go back to Wisconsin for a second time to help Scott Walker. And that thing has become incredibly expensive, another $9 million going into
Yeah,
that governor's
yeah,
race.
yeah.
Will Walker hold on in Wisconsin?
The president's going there today, I believe. He's going to Milwaukee. He's only going to 2 states, Maryland, I think, and Milwaukee, Wisconsin, for the woman who's running against Scott Walker. I forget her name. She's a business executive. Scott Walker is, I think, a tremendous governor. And I think the Democrats really want to knock him off because they're worried about him for running for president. He's got a unique appeal. You know, he's not a college graduate. He's governor of Wisconsin. He's going to college as governor, but he has not completed his degree, which is actually politically a good thing. All these Ivy League educated people, it's not so good, you know. And I think Chris Christie, I think Chris Christie is going down.
I was wondering, because
think he's
5
going
months
down.
ago, he was radioactive. You didn't want to go anywhere near him.
Yeah.
Now he's trying to help governors get elected.
He's trying to help himself run for president in 2016. I don't think he helps Scott Walker one bit by going in there. He helps by authorizing the $9 million check from the Republican Governors Association. And I read the thing about Walker was semi-critical of Christie not doing enough to help him.
He said, thanks for nothing.
Yeah, yeah. So Christie, for the presidential thing, I think Christie's going down. And Romney and Jeb Bush, we can talk about that. But I think Christie's star has gone way down among Republicans.
Let's before I make the audience seasick going back and forth, let's stay with this for a moment,
Right.
because Jeb Bush's son, who's running for that agriculture post in Texas, said the other day, yeah, I think, my dad's warming to the idea, yada, yada. His mother has leaned off saying enough Bushes already.
Yeah. Nice mother. I imagine your mother supporting you like that.
Yeah. Somebody else needs to run. He kind of stumbled out of the gate, though, in April when his book came out. And I started to wonder if he wasn't, the whole thing saying that this immigration policy is an act of love coming into this country. That didn't go over well with hardliners.
Yeah. Now, I think
How
Jeb Bush has a lot of problems. Not all of them are his own making. I think there's Bush fatigue. I think his brother is a big albatross. I think Jeb Bush was a very good governor of Florida and very well respected by people who know him. But he is a Bush, so he's got the Bush name for good and bad. He's wrong. This immigration thing, he has been bad out of the box. He wrote a book about immigration reform, and on the first day of the book tour, comes out, says, basically, I'm for amnesty, pathway to citizenship. It's amnesty. And by the end of the second day of the book tour, he says, well, I could go the other way. Now, it's like he didn't read his own book. I mean, which side of this thing are you on? He'll be murdered in the primaries for that. And Common Core. He's a big believer in Common Core, and I'm sorry, but Republicans, and we've got to get back to this, our position as a party consistently has been, A, we do not believe there's a need or should be a Department of Education. B, we don't believe the federal government should be all over elementary and high school education. College is a different deal. But under Republican platforms since 1980, we have called for the abolition of the Department of Education. 2000, George W. Bush runs on that platform. Platforms don't mean anything, but it is the platform. He gets elected, thanks to Florida, and the first thing he does is increase the Department of Education budget first year by 11% and does the No Child Left Behind. Here we go with a Republican federalizing education. And now every president wants to federalize it. So we have No Child Left Behind under President Bush, which my brother is a school teacher in Albuquerque. He says it's no teacher left behind, is what it really is. Then we get Obama gets in, he scraps it and puts in race to the top, which if you look at educational performance is a race to the bottom. And now we have Common Core. And I've asked people who are in elementary education, and they say it's mind-blowing that each new president, everything changes in education now. You know, the books change, the rules change, what you teach and all that. Why are Republicans going along with this? We believe that in Daytona Beach, the parents and the teachers should decide what goes on in the schools, not somebody in Washington. Am I wrong on this? I think this is where we ought to be. And I think Jeb is on the wrong side of that. And he will find out in Republican primaries that the voters don't like this stuff, I think.
One of my colleagues, Duke Seegers, who you've talked with,
Right
said
over here.
today, he said today that that other candidates have been somewhat damaged. You've mentioned Marco Rubio, who almost disappeared for a little while. Many Floridians wonder if he'll run for president. He's come out to help Rick Scott get reelected and can't help himself. He can't wait to get to a microphone to put a thumb in Charlie Crist's eye because they got into it in the race before. Is Rubio able to rehabilitate himself and be viable for 2016?
I don't think so. And I think a couple of things. I think where Marco Rubio is a great young guy. He's young, first of all. He looks young. I think he's too young right now to run for president. And I think it began with that sip of water during the response to the State of the Union. That actually, something like that actually can hurt you because it's the first thing America saw of him. And he's done the same flip-flop on immigration. I think that we have to get away from this rush of taking a guy who's brand new like him and saying he's got to run for president right away. It used to be you got some seasoning before you ran, you know. He's not ready yet, that's all. Bobby Jindal wasn't ready. He screwed up after he did the State of the Union response. These guys all push it too fast, and you need to take your time. It's like getting to the major leagues in baseball. You get there when you're ready, you know.
Dr. Johnson knows the governor of Texas, Rick Perry, as well, knows his history. How viable is he?
Well, let me tell you, Rick Perry last time shouldn't have run because he just had back surgery. And two months after major back surgery, the guy is standing there on his feet under hot TV lights for 2 hours on national TV on pain meds. No one knew it at the time. He was heavily medicated for this pain. And that's why he wasn't great in those debates, and he couldn't remember the 3 points and all. And people thought he was a dope. He's not a dope. I think Rick Perry's a very good governor. He could have gotten reelected this year if he wanted to. He's got this indictment problem, which is going to be an issue for him. It's a useless indictment, but if you're indicted, you got to focus on it. And they went after Tom DeLay, and they screwed him over, and the same prosecutor's doing it to Rick Perry. But I think Rick Perry's going to run, and we're not talking totally 2016 yet, but there's going to be an establishment person, which will either be Jeb or Romney, and there's going to be a Tea Party person.
Ted Cruz.
Could be Ted Cruz. There's going to be Libertarian, Rand Paul, and then there might be a wild card come in. I don't know. I think the party has nobody at the moment that they're in love with. I've never seen the Republicans not having anybody that anybody really loves.
Is it a mistake for Rick Perry to say, okay, I'm done being governor of Texas, and then not having any mechanism or apparatus to run for president?
No, Reagan wasn't anything when he ran in '76. He had finished being president in governor, in early '75. And he started doing speeches again, and you can devote yourself full-time to campaigning. You don't have to be in office. He's been in office. It's good enough.
So that brings us to Romney. How viable is it? And given the fact that Ann said, that's it, we've done enough, we're enjoying the grandchildren, can they actually walk that back? Could he, if he's convinced, John, could he step up?
Yeah, I think he could. I think what's going on is there's a group of people in the Republican establishment that donate the money. I don't like the term, but they call it the donor class. And they're big, rich guys. And they want a candidate that they think could win. They don't think a Ted Cruz could win in the general election. They want a more establishment Republican. So the guy they wanted after Romney lost 2 years ago, right after that, they were pushing Chris Christie. That was their guy. But Chris Christie bombed out with this Bridgegate, and he's overdone his shtick. This in-your-face shtick. It works in New York and New Jersey. It doesn't play around the country in the long run. You know, you wear out your act. The only guy who didn't wear his act out, really, was Reagan because it was a gentle, nice act. But the in-your-face, it gets boring, and I think Chris Christie's burned out. And I think the donors guys have left him, and they've gone to Jeb, and they've been pushing Jeb to run. And Jeb is reluctantly, well, one day I want to run, another day he's not sure. And they're a little sick of that, these donors. They say, let's go get Romney. And I think Romney is open to it. But I think what Romney wants is he wants what Hillary wants, which is, I want the nomination. I don't want to spend 6 months fighting for it. I want all the money, I want the nomination, and I want all the money ready for the general election. I don't want to get ripped to pieces by the right like I did last time. so that when I arrive at the convention, I'm broke, I'm exhausted, and I've taken such extreme positions that I can't win the election.
Okay. So we go through the Republican field. I want to get to the Senate in a moment because we'll burn through time quickly. The Democrats. Is it Hillary's to lose?
It's Hillary's to lose, and
Still.
she could lose it, yeah.
With Benghazi hanging around her neck?
Oh, yeah, but I think they don't care in the Democratic Party about Benghazi at all. But I think it's the same as 8 years ago. It's hers on name and a feeling of the Clintons, but it's a superficial warmth towards Hillary. The passion on the left is not for Hillary Clinton. And the passion over there is Occupy Wall Street, anti-Wall Street, anti-rich people, class warfare. These people really feel this stuff, you know? And their heroine is Elizabeth Warren. And if Elizabeth Warren ran against Hillary from the left and said, Hillary Clinton is in bed with Wall Street, Hillary Clinton takes 200 grand a speech from Goldman Sachs and all that, they would get somewhere. And by the way, we were talking before about her comment the other day that corporations don't create jobs. I can tell you what's going on with Hillary. She's nervous about Elizabeth Warren. And so she's tactically trying to move away from looking like she's a pawn of Wall Street and being a little anti-business for a while until that calms down the left. She is worried about Elizabeth Warren. Elizabeth Warren's got more passion, and being a woman takes away the first woman president thing from Hillary. Believe me, they are worried in the Hillary camp about Elizabeth Warren, who suddenly last weekend, for the first time, opened the door to considering running. She said, who knows what the future is going to bring, and things can change and all.
What's the magnetism with her? I'm not getting it.
It's the passion against the rich, the powerful.
That's it?
Well, on the left, that's enough. What was it with Obama? It was anti the Iraq War. I'm pure on the Iraq War. Hillary voted for it. I was against it. Boom. They go for him. Plus, being black, I mean,
okay.
It was a historic thing. This is going to be historic, first woman president, but Elizabeth Warren takes that away.
Andrew Cuomo, at any point? No.
Not happening.
So after that, it's nobody, really.
Nobody.
No big things.
Nobody.
Okay.
It's either Hillary by acclamation or someone from the left goes after her, and then anything can happen.
All right. Let's talk about the Senate. Mitch McConnell in Kentucky, your minority leader, does he survive this?
Yes, he will win his seat.
Really?
I think he'll win. He's very unpopular in Kentucky. He has the highest disapproval in his state of any senator in America, 60% disapproval. Same disapproval that Obama has in Kentucky. But he knows how to win the state, and the opponent is a terrible opponent. She's run a terrible campaign. I mean, to not be able to admit who you voted for. Listen, if I run against Mark, and he's running against me, we're running in a general election, I'll tell you who's going to win the election, is whichever candidate makes the other one the issue in the election. So if you make me the issue, I'll lose. If I make you the issue, you'll lose. McConnell should have been made the issue. Instead, this Alison Lundergan Grimes has blown the thing by repeatedly refusing to say who she voted for president.
Is this the woman that Twittered in her answers the next day, or is that somebody else?
No, she said it in the editorial board meeting and then in the debate. So it's a constitutional privilege that we get to keep our vote secret. Well, that's true, but that's not worth spending your time on. It would be better if she said, all right, look, I voted for the president, and I now wish he'd run the country more like Bill Clinton than Obama. He could have said that. She could have said that, and that's the end of the story. And then she could have turned and she could have said, meanwhile, Senator McConnell has done X, Y, and Z, and he's no good. She didn't do it. She's going to lose that race. McConnell will win.
Okay. Moving over to Kansas, we've spent a lot of time talking about that.
Huge.
Pat Roberts, who's disappointed Kansans. There's an independent in that mix. Does he hold on?
And no Democrat, by the way.
Right.
So the independent, and my guy Pat Caddell on Political Insiders, Pat Caddell is secretly helping Greg Orman, the independent, because Pat wants an independent movement in America. We can get into that in a minute. But I think that Pat Roberts will, I think he will win that seat because it's a very conservative state. And I just don't see them. They're going to maybe throw the governor out, but I somehow think Pat Roberts holds on.
All right. Going down to Louisiana, Mary Landrieu.
We're going to a runoff on December 6th because there's 4 people really in the race. No one's going to get to 50%. That seat will not be decided till December 6th and may determine control of the Senate. And let's just say that were the case. So we get to November 4th, a week from today, and by late tonight, a week from tonight, we don't know, who's running the Senate because Louisiana is the key seat. So there's a month more to go. Can you imagine the money that will be sent into Louisiana on both sides to win one seat? And it's Louisiana. So legally and illegally, the money's going to be unbelievable.
My mole on Alaska is Dean Grahams, who's been nudging me on that one. That one is an interesting race up in Alaska.
Begich, who's the incumbent, is going to lose that race. Run a bad campaign, has been in trouble from the get-go. He's going to lose.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
The Democrats are going to lose a lot of seats. The issue is, can they win a couple of Republican seats to make up enough to hold on? So we're going through these, and we'll go through them, and then we'll add them up and see if Republicans get +6, which is what we have to have.
Tell me, what charm school did Udall go to? He has alienated a whole bunch of people, and this is Gardner Udall.
In Colorado.
Yeah.
He's
What's
going to
going on
lose.
there? He is?
Republican will win that seat, yeah.
And let's take us back to North Carolina. Tillis and Hagan.
Well, this is one of the crucial seats. Kay Hagan has really never really trailed in this race, and he is the Speaker, was the Speaker of the House. So he's sort of an incumbent in their minds also. But he's closed it up. It's very close. North Carolina is no longer, in my view, a red state. It's a purpley state, swing state. If I had to bet, I would think she might hold on.
Wow.
Yeah. I just have a feeling. That state voted for Obama in 2008. Whoever would have thought that? The state of Jesse Helms would vote for Barack Obama for president. They would put the Democratic Convention in 2012 in Charlotte. He almost won it in 2012. And Kay Hagan is a reasonably competent campaigner. I have a feeling she may hold on.
In Arkansas, Cotton and Pryor.
Cotton's winning. The Republican's going to win that seat. It's like Alaska. I think these Democrats are going down. Begich, Pryor's going down. And there are 3 seats that aren't really contested that we're going to win, too. South Dakota, West Virginia, and Montana.
What about Iowa? Ernst and Braley.
I think she's going to win. I think Jody Ernst is going to win that, the Republican woman who got famous for talking about pig castration and how we need to do this in Washington. And I think that she will win, and I think that she will be a very sort of up-and-coming star in Washington, replacing Michelle Bachmann and Palin as sort of the new conservative woman. But she's got some humor to her. She's good. I think she'll win.
There's a Scott Brown who won in Massachusetts, moves to New Hampshire. He's running there against Shaheen, the incumbent.
Yeah.
Close encounter. You, in one other time in your life, you saw someone, and we had him as a guest right here, run in one state, then run in another, and you told that story in the
Bob
last
Smith.
week. He was here in the
Yeah.
President Speaker Series in our first year.
A friend of mine. Yeah, well, Bob lost to Scott Brown this summer back in New Hampshire. Bob was a congressman from New Hampshire, then the U.S. Senator from New Hampshire, and he ran for president as an independent. And that was all the end to him. He was gone. He comes down here, goes into the real estate business, runs for the Senate here, goes nowhere, goes back to New Hampshire, ran this year against Scott Brown this summer in the Republican primary and lost. And he's a good guy, Bob. But Scott Brown is a great candidate. He's really good. But Jeanne Shaheen was the governor for 3 terms. This is her second term as a senator. We talked about this on our show this weekend. Pat thinks that Scott Brown may win. I don't think he's going to win. I think Jeanne Shaheen, because they know her up there that much, will hold on by a point.
So does he have this problem of being like a carpetbagger?
I don't think too much. I think a lot of people in New Hampshire have moved there from Massachusetts.
Tax reasons.
Yeah, and he's lived there. I mean, maybe it hurts him for a point or two, and that could be the difference. Interesting thing about Scott Brown, as you said, he got elected in 2010 for Teddy Kennedy's seat, running against Martha Coakley. Then he loses his seat 2 years later to Elizabeth Warren, and now he's run against 3 women in a row. In 6 years he's run, or 5 years really, 3 women candidates, which is not easy to do. Women candidates for a man is a difficult thing to navigate, because you got to be very careful or you'll be nailed for condescension or arrogance or whatever. You have to be careful. And he's done very well with it, I think.
We're going to come in the audience. Kyle is going to, with a microphone, allow you to ask you a question directly of John. Before we do that, so let's assume...
We're going to do Georgia.
Yeah, all right,
Okay.
we didn't do Georgia.
Well, Georgia
Which
is
is
the most
none.
interesting of them all. It's a Republican seat. Saxby Chambliss retires, open seat. The Republicans should win this seat. But the Republican we nominated, this guy David Perdue, has stumbled on his business record because he allegedly outsourced jobs. The Democrat, Michelle Nunn, Sam Nunn's daughter, she's a good candidate. She has been really hammering him with this, and he's gone down. She is now ahead in Georgia.
She was trailing.
She was trailing. She's now ahead. And they have a crazy law in Georgia, which is in a statewide race, if you don't get 50%, there has to be a runoff. And the runoff takes place on January 6th. January 6th. The new Senate is sworn in on January 5th. So they would start the new Senate with 99 senators waiting for the next day for this thing. And there's a third candidate who's gumming up the works in Georgia. No, I think no one's going to get 50%.
Wow.
So we might not know till next year who runs the Senate. Maybe, who knows?
Yeah, you'd think they'd delay the swearing in for a day or so. It might screw up the caterer, but, just delay it for a couple of days.
Well, the thing is, it's interesting. See, the U.S., the way the law works, take Florida. Florida determines its own elections. You decide everything about what goes on here, the hours of the polls being open, early vote, whatever you want. It's up to the state. The feds have nothing to do with it, other than the age of the voters. The feds have said you can be 18 and vote. The feds have nothing to do with when the runoff in Georgia is. It's the Georgia legislature said it.
So this begs the big question.
Yeah.
If the Republicans take the Senate,
Yeah.
what does this really do? The people in the audience are wondering, okay, what do we get out of this? Does it slow down the liberal agenda of the White House or make the president less relevant in his last couple of years? What do they get out of it?
Okay, there's a lot that goes on. First of all, we'd rather have the Senate than not have it. We'd have the House and the Senate, and that is powerful to stop Obama from whatever he might want to do legislatively. Can't control what he does otherwise. A normal president would say, okay, I'm going to work with the Congress, and they'd compromise. But this one is a little different, and he's a lame duck, and he's arrogant, and he's gotten away with so much stuff, I don't know what he's going to do. But I think I know what Republicans are going to do, and this is what worries me. Because the Republicans, up till today at 7:42, with a week to go, there is no Republican program that we're running on. Back in 94, we had the Contract for America. Okay, at least that was something voters said, if I vote for them, this is what they're going to do. And here's why that's important. If you're a congressperson and you get elected on a 10-point plan, what are you going to do? You go to Washington to pass the 10-point plan because you said, I'm going to do it. But if you didn't say anything during the campaign, you get there after you win, what do you do? What do you do? And they're going to get there in January. They're going to get in their conference room, and they're all going to look at each other, and every single member of the House and Senate, Republicans, we got elected because we're going to repeal Obamacare. No, we got elected because we're going to address the debt. No, we got elected to cut taxes. They're all going to fight each other like crazy. Our own party is going to cannibalize itself over what to do. And you tell me who's the leader that's going to walk in the room and say, no. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to do these 3 things first, and then we'll get on to other things. There is no leader. And this worries me to death, that we will play right into the hands of the Democrats, that we will look like children eating each other up on the schoolyard, and Hillary is going to be sitting over there and saying to America, you want these guys running the country? And the media, of course, is going to love her. I'm very worried about this.
We're going to come to the audience. If you would, please stand and ask your question. It's easier for everyone to hear if you stand. Kyle, with the microphone, if you raise your hand, he'll come right up to you. And we thank you for joining us tonight in the President Speaker Series.
Well, John, thank you for being here. I've got a real technical question. Who wins the series, San Francisco or Kansas City?
What did I read? 6 out of the last 8 teams that are down 3-2 coming home, including the Royals in '85, have won. So the Royals could easily win. It's the best World Series. I'm a huge baseball fan. This is the way baseball was supposed to be played. Bunting, hitting behind the runner, hitting the other way. It's the best.
By the way, I heard today they're trying to speed up the game. Have you heard this?
Oh, yeah, they're doing it in the Arizona Fall League. They want you, when you get in the batter's box, if there's no one on base, and you step in the box, you can't step out. And the pitches have to be thrown every 20 seconds, and let's move it along. It's good.
Maybe
Just a second question real quick, and that was kind of a joke question. But
I know, but it's a very important question.
But it is a very important question. Let's say Hillary's is versus Romney, okay?
Yeah.
What does a campaign look like? Is it Hillary, I'm going to break the glass ceiling, Mitt Romney, debt and spending and all that? How does it look? What would it look like?
Well, Hillary's going to try to savage Romney all over again the same way Obama did. This is what I worry about Romney, who I think is a very good man. It's not a knock on him. I think Romney's a bad candidate. I think you cannot run for president and put your money in the Cayman Islands and Swiss bank accounts. I mean, it's just not done. Things like that and have car elevators in your house and all. Republicans have fought for years to get away from the image that we're the party of the rich. And we are not the party of the rich. The Democrats are actually the party of the rich, but the image is the other way. And when we nominated Mitt Romney, it just looked terrible. And I hate to think we're going to go back and do it again. Why can't we get a new candidate? Why can't we get someone new who's a conservative, who can sell this thing? I believe conservatism is so good that if you sell it right to America, I don't care if you're black, Hispanic, woman, it doesn't matter. It's in your best interest to follow a more conservative path. But we can't sell it with these candidates.
Back in the audience over here, and then we want to come over here with a question. Good evening.
Hello. Earlier in the lecture, you mentioned how in the education system of America, there's a lot that liberalism is taught in the colleges and the K through 12 system. Obviously, it's very well known that the universities of America are the bastions of liberalism. But what curriculum in the K through 12 education would you characterize as promoting liberalism?
I don't know if it's in the curriculum per se, because I'm not in these schools. I was talking to my secretary today, who has a daughter who's in 8th grade. And she was telling me the stuff that goes on in class there, that the English teachers, in interpreting literature, they do it all from a liberal point of view. I had that in high school. I went to boarding school. It's a subtle little thing that goes on. And I just think it's out of control. And the result of it in America is interesting. More and more parents are doing homeschooling because they can't stand it. They just can't stand it. More and more want to get their kids out of the public system into parochial schools, which does not go on. Or the kids are smart. This is the great thing, is how many kids have I met who've gotten out of college, and because I've written Harvard Hates America, they come up to me, and they may not have gone to Harvard, it doesn't matter. They went to some other college, they come up and they say, same thing happened to me. Some teacher was giving me grief because I was more conservative. What happens is these kids are made conservative by the liberalism of the professors. The kids see it. But I wish we didn't have it going on. Why can't we just teach the subject?
In the front, Dean Grams.
Yes, thank you for being here tonight, John. And I want to go back to the Kay Hagan race against Tillis.
Yeah.
There's been a scandal, the stimulus scandal,
Yep.
where they profited for this and then pocketed the leftover money, which I guess is nice to do if you can do it. No shows for Senate Armed Forces Committee about half the time. No show for the debate, I think last Saturday. And then the endorsement by the Charlotte Observer, which is the most negative statement anybody could make, endorsing you. She said basically she's not any good, but they're for her. Is there something wrong with the Tillis campaign? It seems like these are things that they should cream her with.
They should cream her, and so that's the thing. He has not run a good campaign because he had his own baggage. Like I mentioned, he was the Speaker of the House, whatever they call it. And as such, he is seen as an incumbent, not an outsider. We needed an outsider to run against her. On the stimulus thing, I have a fellow former congressman, friend of mine, who lives in Asheville, and he emailed me over the weekend. He said, take it to the bank. Hagan is going to lose. He said, I've been seeing these commercials, and here's what's going on. They've got ads showing her family has a business that profited from stimulus money, which she voted for.
Yeah.
And that is why she didn't show at the debate, because she didn't want to get asked about it.
She's the one that Twittered her answers in the next
There
day.
you go. Okay, so that's her. So I'm going against my friend. He says she's definitely gone. The reason I think she holds on is North Carolina's changing, and I think she's got a big get out the vote thing. And I've not seen Tillis getting ahead of her enough where I think he's got the momentum going into the last day. But listen, I hope I'm wrong about the ones when I pick, but I'm giving you my honest answer. I think she wins, and I think what's her face, Jean Shaheen wins in New Hampshire.
Our first email question of the night comes from Wayne in Ormond Beach. He writes, I'll assume you stay informed on New York politics. Some comparisons on performance between Governor Scott and Governor Christ dwell on the differences in the economy. How would you compare the accomplishments between New York's Democratic governor and Governor Scott for the same time period?
Well, I'm going to say something. I don't really know much about what's gone down here. I think Scott's been pretty good. But
Creation of over 600,000
yeah, and I think he
jobs.
inherited a bad situation. And I have to say, I hate Andrew Cuomo generally, but his first year as governor of New York, he was more conservative fiscally than any Republican governor in my lifetime in New York. We've had Nelson Rockefeller, Malcolm Wilson briefly, and George Pataki.
More
And they were
conservative than Pataki.
Pataki was a liberal on spending. He drove up spending like crazy in New York. He was always trying to show himself not to be a conservative. He was not a conservative governor, and neither is Cuomo, except his first year. He brought down debt, got a good deal through the legislature, cut taxes, cut property tax. That first year, he was very effective, but that's the end. I can't stand him. Yeah.
Back in the audience with the microphone. There we go. We got to do it by microphone so everybody can hear you. Go ahead,
John,
sir.
thanks for coming. We appreciate it.
Love it.
What role is Ben Carson going to play in 2016?
Good question.
Good question. In the Iowa, Des Moines Register Iowa poll 2 Fridays ago of Republicans in Iowa, I think that's who they polled, Romney came in first at 17 points, and Ben Carson came in second at 11 points. And, there's talk about him running. And this is not a knock on him. He's a brilliant guy and a very nice guy and a smart doctor. But we cannot have, let's reverse it, okay? I go to the local hospital here. I walk into the board of directors today, and I say, I want to be the surgeon-in-chief of this hospital right now. And they say, are you a doctor? No, I'm not a doctor. Have you ever worked in a hospital? No, I haven't worked in a hospital. Well, then what standing do you have to run the hospital? Well, I want to run it. Oh, okay. That's the same thing as being president. We've been through it with Obama. We cannot be electing people because they write a book or because they're good on TV and say that guy could be president. Because being president is an unbelievable job that requires multi-levels of stuff. Number one, you got to be a great politician, and you got to understand what goes on inside the federal government that you want to run. And what we're seeing right now, day by day with Obama, is he's clueless about how to run the federal government. Doesn't know how to do it. And it's a huge job. Let me ask the president of this school, is running this school easy? Could some guy off the street walk in here and say, I want to be the president of this school and do it? No. You've devoted your life in academia. I've seen academics. It's unbelievable what they go through to get to the top of the heap. And the same thing with President of the United States. And by the way, Hillary shouldn't be president either. She can't run anything. And because she was married to a president, we're going to make her president? If I go to a neurosurgeon I need surgery. And the guy says, look, I'm all booked up, but my wife will do the surgery on it. It's not going to work.
Right up front here. Ed Connor.
John, my question is on voter ID laws and voter fraud. About 3 or 4 years ago, I guess Mark had John Fund down here for a book signing, and he wrote a very enlightening book about voter fraud. I had no idea it was so prevalent in the U.S. If you ask a liberal what the most egregious example of voter fraud is, they'll probably point to Bush Gore 2000. But if you ask a conservative, I think they'll probably point to Al Franken in Minnesota because he was the deciding vote on Obamacare. How do we fight back against voter fraud? Is it up to the state attorneys general? Is there anything, because I think this really goes a long way to undermining people's feeling that their vote counts, and it undermines their feeling that they should get involved in the process because they've got illegals voting, they've got dead people voting, and you think, well, what's the difference? My vote's going to be
But
negative.
speaking about dead people voting, and this is unintentional voter fraud, in order to come, not this trip, next week I'm going to Fort Myers for something, and I won't be around New York on Election Day, so I got an absentee ballot. I'm from Nassau County, Long Island. I call up, they send me an application, I fill it out, send it in, they send me the ballot. I voted it and mailed it in. 2 days later, another ballot comes for my mother, who died a year and a half ago. And I took it, I did not open it, and I mailed it back to the Commissioner of Elections. I said, this can't be happening, all right? I'm sure it's a mistake, it's an honest mistake, but if the press finds out about something like this, it doesn't look right. You can't be mailing out legal absentee ballots to dead people. Please fix it. I haven't heard back from the guy yet. But the bigger issue on this thing, and this is a huge issue, I think in our lifetime we have to reverse electronic voting machines. Get rid of them. We have to have paper ballots. Only paper can be recounted honestly. There's a story out today, Mark, right, about, where is it? Somewhere, yeah. Where the machines, you vote Republican, it shows Democrat. Yeah. And it happened, I remember, in the Harry Reid re-election race. Some guy went down and voted, and he voted against Reid, and it kept coming up that it was for Reid. And there's no paper in some of these machines. I think in my machines at home, we have a paper ballot, we fill it out and stick it in an electronic machine, but the paper exists somewhere. Yeah. But if we're going to have straight electronic voting, how do we know how they don't get in the back and change the tumbler and change the numbers? That has got to change, and I think we've got to push for that.
Ed, thank you. There was something that happened in the last hour that I wanted to report to everyone. An unmanned rocket exploded early tonight. According to NASA, the Orbital Sciences Corporation's Antares rocket and Cygnus cargo spacecraft were set to launch at 6:22 Eastern Time. It was set to carry some 5,000 pounds of supplies and experiments to the International Space Station. There was a failure on launch, according to NASA spokesman Jay Bolden. There was no indications of a loss of life. More information will be coming available as the government releases it, but it's a huge deal. The space program has been absent, too, from this campaign season. Is it because the public doesn't understand it, doesn't value it? What's the deal? We're close to it here.
Yeah, but there's no presidential leadership. For the last 2 presidents have abandoned manned space flight. Let's face it, they're not into it. Neither of them. Bush didn't want to do it. Obama's not the slightest been interested in it. The idea, and we're old enough, most of us in here, to remember the space race and the fantastic accomplishments of this country and what it meant to beat the Russians on this deal. Here we are 40 years later, and we have to pay those bastards to fly our astronauts to our space station that we paid for? Something's really wrong.
Okay, where are we? We're way over here this time.
We have to pay Vladimir Putin for anything? It's crazy.
How do I know when it's working?
Go ahead,
it's working.
Yeah, good. As you mentioned earlier, the problem people are having with conservatives is that they're not understanding what they're trying to give them. Do you have any recommendation on where I could look to try and understand that myself, because I do find that my ideas tend to agree with them, but I'm not entirely sure what they are entirely all about.
Okay, I got to think about it for a minute. But
A
I mean,
good resource that would not be
well,
totally in the
number
tank.
one, I mean, I really think we've all gotten away, me especially, we don't read enough anymore, and there's so much good stuff to read. We're too into video and TV and all. You got to read, a lot of different papers, magazines, and there are these think tanks like the American Heritage Foundation and all. They publish a lot of great stuff, and you need to be up to date on it, and then figure it out your own brand of conservatism. I think.
Yeah, the best advice we can give you is to read as much as possible.
And
Then
listen
weigh
to the
whole
radio.
thing.
Listen to good radio, because
Yeah.
you can learn a lot.
And hopefully, if you don't listen to something that's too, you have to try to get a centrist view. If you don't have a centrist view, then you're never going, if you just get spoon-fed, I'm conservative, but I get limits as to how much Hannity and O'Reilly I can take. I have to hear the other side.
Oh, me too. I do.
Otherwise, you get myopic.
The other thing is, I think we've got to remember something. We were alive, and all of us in this room, for the best conservative, which was Ronald Reagan. And what distinguished him from all these others, I think, was tone. He was a gentleman, he was kind, he had great humor, and he sold conservatism not out of anger, but out of compassion for the American people. Now, for instance, not to dump on Romney, but that 47% thing really hurt Romney. Now, we're in a private room. He says, I don't care about the 47%. They're never going to vote for me anyway. They're all takers and moochers. I know what Reagan would have said. He said, no, you can't be president of this country, or you can't be a congressman. You can't be a senator. You can't be the governor if you think the people you represent are moochers and takers and losers. You're wrong. You work for them. So the fact that a lot of people are getting food stamps is really not their fault. It's the government, the system, is pushing this stuff on people. I have a quadriplegic brother. He's on Social Security disability. 26 years I've been taking care of him. Every year I get summoned to the Social Security office. I'm going the week from 2 Thursdays from now. And I go down there and I have all this paperwork and they recertify him. And then at the end of the meeting, since Obama became president, the new thing happens. The person says, by the way, your brother is eligible for food stamps. And I go, yeah, well, we don't want them. And they say, no, you take them. Take the food stamps. You can get them. The government representative is pushing this stuff out the door on people. And I tell this to Pat Cadell, and he says, yeah, of course. You know why they're pushing it? The banks do the food stamps now. The bank, you don't get stamps. You get a credit card. And the card has an amount of money on it, and you get to go spend it every month. That servicing of that card is done by some bank that's making money off the food stamps. Therefore, there's an incentive. The government has an incentive. They want more people hooked on government benefits. The bank has an incentive. They're making money. You are paying the money in your taxes. That's the fault of the government. That's who Romney should have been mad at. That's who Reagan would have been mad at, not the people. We work for the people, right? So,
In the audience, George sent us an email before we come back up here. He says, who would John want to run for president? If you could pick the person now, who would you want to run?
I don't know. I'm not
You don't have a
I'm
big
not
name.
advocating anybody. I just analyze, and I'll know the next one that I really like when he comes along or she comes along.
All right, back in the audience now, sir.
Hello, sir.
Hi.
Thank you for coming to our school. Knowing you're talking about, or you were talking about how if the Republicans win the Senate, and obviously when they get there for that first meeting and all the bickering that will be going on, and how you worry, do you think that there may be a possibility that somehow they will be able to get together and try to find those key things in which they can go around, or do you think that it's going to be something where it's just going to be a big fight?
All right, a great question. I really didn't answer earlier properly. My rule is you will govern in office the way you ran for office. The Republicans did a good job because of that contract for America. They enacted the contract for America. Reagan in '80 ran on this tax cut thing. He said, I'm going to revive the economy by a 30% across-the-board tax cut, and I'm going to rebuild the American military. What did he do? Exactly that. It was changed. It was 25% tax cut over 3 years. He did it. I voted for it. Proudly, it revived the economy. He rebuilt the U.S. military. He did exactly because he said, I'm going to do it. The public voted for him. The opposite is Obama 2012. Obama ran on nothing for re-election except trashing Romney and trashing the Republicans, party of the rich, class warfare. What has he done in his second term? Zilch. No governing, no ruling, nothing, because he ran on nothing. Here's what I worry about the Republicans. They didn't run on something. Why couldn't they have gotten everybody together, come up with a unified alternative to Obamacare, a plan to grow the economy and finally get good jobs going? We're not capable of this? Of course we are. We are the ones who know how to make the economy work. Every time a Republican takes over the White House, things get better because what we stand for works. But we've become so afraid of the media attacking us, we've come out with nothing this year. It's a campaign about nothing. We're letting the Democrats self-destruct, which they're doing.
Is that why when Hillary made the statement the other day that companies don't create jobs, she got a pass? Because nobody was going to call her on it in the media?
Well, that,
Except
and I
Bob.
think she's sucking up to the left. And then I saw a thing on the plane coming down here. I was reading the New York Post business section, and it's a big article in there about the Wall Street went crazy over this thing. Because Wall Street, this kills me, Wall Street thinks they own Hillary. And that they've got Hillary all primed to be president, and that she'll be a friend of theirs. And then suddenly she says something like this, and so they go, oh my God, what is going on? What has happened in America that an institution like Wall Street, 2 years ahead, says we've got this woman as ours, and this is just awful. And as a Republican, we've got to not be the party of Wall Street. We've got to be the party of Main Street and realize that big isn't great. Big government, big media, big business, they are not the friend of the average person anymore. There's another world going on.
3 years ago, people mentioned Sarah Palin's name. They'd say, put her in the running for president. Is she just a commercial venture now?
Yeah, no, forget it. Not happening.
In the audience now.
I'm from Des Moines, and just briefly, my parents and their friends, a lot of those people, although they're rapidly disappearing, knew Ron Reagan. What you see is what you saw is what you got. He was very popular even when I was a baby in Des Moines. He was a stand-up person. What I want to ask you, John, is after this election, what's going to happen with Obama and the southern border and this? Can we anticipate a massive wave of future Democratic voters where we'll reach to a point of European semi-democratic socialism where it's going to be the same party, not from people that are here year after year?
I think this is what the Democrats want.
Yes.
And I think half the Republicans, in all fairness, half the Republican Party did nothing about sealing up the southern border because they wanted cheap labor. And it's the conservatives who say we've got to seal the border. It's something morally wrong about breaking the law to come into America and be rewarded by being given citizenship. Okay, it's not anti-Hispanic. It's morally, this is not the way this country should conduct itself. Now, to me, if you've come here illegally and you're living here for years and all that, let's be frank, we're not going to pack you up and throw you out of here. But I don't think we should give you citizenship. I could see giving you a green card, you can be here legally, you can work, pay taxes, great. But you're not voting and you're not an American citizen. There's something precious about being an American citizen. The kids who were brought here as children, who've gone to school here that we have paid for, they should be able to become Americans. That I think is all right, because I think that they're not at fault for what their parents did.
Before we go back to the audience, did the movement toward acceptability of same-sex marriage come as a result of advice that those on the far right gave to those running saying, social issues are a loser for us, let's just not get involved, and we opened the field up for the left to just advance the ball?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's political so much. I just think the country, it's a funny country, We've gotten more conservative on fiscal things and defense things, but we've gotten much more liberal on social things. Okay. Dope, marriage. I think And you know where I think the next president who could get elected, you asked who I would support, and I don't have one, but I could outline the person. It would be fiscally very conservative, that we got to stop this debt, right? And very strong rebuilding our defense and all that, but libertarian on social issues. I just don't think Republicans should be the party anymore that gets all up in arms over what people do. I don't want to know what people do. It's their business.
Right up front.
Although I act like a 10-year-old a lot of times, I'm old enough to
Welcome
remember.
to the group.
I'm old enough to remember where I was when John Kennedy was shot. And as an older person, I'm concerned, this is a two-segment question, I'm concerned with what I see as a wholesale disengagement by large segments of our population today in all processes relating to being governed. And with that, I wonder, is it going to take an event like the attack on Pearl Harbor or the event of 9/11 to re-engage or to engage for the first time? That demographic, which I'd like to know your opinion, what's the demographic and what's it going to take to get them back in the game?
What is the demographic that's
I'd
bugging
like
out?
in my estimation, and
Yeah.
I'm not sure that I'm
Are
right.
you saying the young?
It seems to me that on a percentage basis, that I look at my son at 35 years old and he thinks his vote doesn't count.
Ah,
All right, and
voting you're talking about, yeah.
And so I'm not sure if it's age driven or not. I will admit that. But from your perspective, what's the demographic that is not engaged, and what's it going to take to engage them?
Okay, that's a great question. Couple things. I think, first of all, I didn't know exactly what you meant when you began which demographic and not being engaged, because I do think 9/11, I could almost cry when I think how the response in this country by young men and women to serve America, when I remember when I was young and these soldiers were coming back from Vietnam and they were called war criminals and were spat upon and were advised when they got home and they got to their base, their officer said, we recommend you take your uniform off before you leave the base. I mean, that's just unbelievable. And in 30 years, we've gone from that extreme to a wonderful sense of patriotism. But that's separate from what you're talking about. You're talking about voting, you know. And here's what I think is happening in America. And it's the most fundamental, profound change in a century. The people have given up on the government, on both political parties, on the political establishment. That's why I said big. That they don't trust big business or big media, and they think they're all in cahoots to rig the game for them and the average American, most of whom are in this room, say, something bad is going on in America. A coup has happened right in front of me, and I don't count anymore. And the American dream, down the drain, the direction of the country, down the drain. Now, politically, and Pat and I talk about this a lot, what is going to turn this around? And we think it's going to be this. A candidate has to come along, neither Republican or Democrat, and run against the whole rotten GD mess and say to the people, I'm not running as a Republican and I'm not running as a Democrat. I'm running as an American because these two parties have ruined the country. And if you want to save this country, we have to do it. We have to take the power away from these people. Well, there you go. The fact that they're applauding, the fact that you're applauding that message tells me that that's right, that it does exist. We don't have a candidate yet. Now, 20 years ago, Ross Perot ran, and he's a good man. He's a flawed political candidate, didn't really want to win. And the country wasn't as in a bad shape as it is now. I think if you had a better, saner version of Ross Perot, maybe that guy or gal could really take this thing on.
We've got time for one more question from the audience. Fred Costello is a former mayor of Ormond Beach, former state representative who is seeking election once again, and he joins us from the audience.
Former. You mentioned a couple things I want to put together. One thing was that the new representatives or senators haven't gotten together and figured out an agenda. You also mentioned something that I'm very passionate about, and that's our national debt. So now if you were this candidate that's neither Republican or Democrat, that is the one that were elected, and you went to Washington and you're in the room with all the senators and all the representatives, what's your recommendation for what we should do about the debt, including would you vote to expand the debt or would you vote to, quote, shut down the government? What would you do about the debt?
It's right in my wheelhouse. I love this topic, all right? When I was 27 and I'm a brand new congressman and I knew nothing about anything, and I'm sitting with the guy from Asheville, the other congressman, we're sitting there one day on the floor of the House just waiting to do something, and Trent Lott, who was the Republican whip in the House, he comes over and he sits down and he says, fellas, the president would like you to vote to increase the debt ceiling. And I looked at Mr. Lott, I didn't even call him Trent, and I said, what's the debt ceiling? I didn't even know what it was. And Ronald Reagan was asking us to vote to increase it to $1 trillion in 1981, I think it was. So that's 30 plus years ago. We've gone from 1 trillion to 18 trillion, I think it is, whatever it is. And that's over a 30-year period. The only way we're going to reverse this situation is over a 30-year period. The idea that we can overnight fix the debt, forget it. The smart move would be to adopt a 30-year plan of how to budget the federal government, including little bits set aside over time to pay down the debt, and lock it in and have everybody agree to it. Here's what would happen is, A, it would work, and B, the markets would be happy that finally America was addressing this thing in a responsible way. We didn't create it overnight. We can't fix it overnight, but you can fix it over time. You look at an aircraft carrier in the ocean, you can't turn the thing on a dime. It has to be done in a big, sweeping turn. But at least it's turning, and we've got to turn it. And I think that would work.
I want to thank some people who helped make this event possible tonight. First, our host, Dr. Johnson. Kyle Corbett, who helped with the audience, up above Tony Petro and his folks. Thank you so much for keeping the lights on and balancing the audio back at our radio station. John Warrup, who is the executive producer for our radio talk program, heard on 1150 WNDB and FM 93.5. This broadcast will be on once again this Saturday at 9 a.m. and then over the Thursday, Friday, Thanksgiving period. I want to tell you, if we have the visual for the next event that's coming up, it'll be in 2 weeks. Look at that. Mission at Nuremberg. This is an incredible story that we found that exists. The Nuremberg trials, what happened? We actually sent in this country chaplains to try to find redeeming qualities in the Nazis that were about to go on trial. If that isn't bizarre, what happened and where these people were living, and how the United States and the Russians, who didn't trust each other at all, had to figure out what judges they were going to put. The story is compelling. It's never been told before. Tim Townsend is a former religious editor for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, and he will come and tell his story 1 week from tomorrow. 2 weeks after that, we close out our fall series with the story of the rebuilding of the Iraqi Air Force. Major Mike Banzett will be here to talk about that. It's called A Flower Shop in Baghdad. There's a little humor in it, but there's a lot of truth, and the first look at ISIS, what he saw. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, thank you all for giving a part of your evening. John Leboutillier.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you all. Have a pleasant evening.